We're continuing our conversation concerning the passing of Secretary of State Colin Powell, the former Secretary of State. He died this morning from complications of COVID at the age of 84. It may have had something to do with a blood cancer that he was suffering from that left his immune system weakened. Terron Sims is the vice chair of the DNC Veterans and Military Families Council. He joins us this morning. Terron, a West Point grad, someone who probably looked up to Colin Powell. Your thoughts on his passing this morning?
Yeah, this one hurts. General Powell definitely was someone who I looked up to, and I'd like to say emulated, especially when I was from the time period when I was a senior in high school to my early cadet years. Actually, right now, just thinking about and having to verbalize all this is causing me a little emotional right now. I jokingly say that I remember when I was at West Point Prep School, the first day, cadet candidate orientation. Our tech NCO, Staff Sergeant Lorenzo Landrum, asked all of us kids why we wanted to go to West Point. I proudly stood up and said I wanted to be the dark-skinned version of Colin Powell. He might literally be the last hero I can say I had who's still alive. There might be one or two others. But, you know, I was listening to your conversation with Mayor Pratt earlier and was just a flow of emotions and memories were going through my head of what could have been if he would have chosen to run for president back in 2000. But he was a man of integrity. And, you know, a lot of people don't know about black and white. I think you had to know him personally. No, he was unabashedly black. He was proud of his heritage, of who he was, of where he grew up in the Bronx, right? Everything about him, of who he was and what made him, he was proud of those aspects of himself, which made me proud. You know, being a black man, being in the Army, knowing how difficult it was at times to serve, knowing that he went through much more than I did, and you know, proud to say that he was someone of integrity who held that torch and set a really great example for young leaders such as myself, both men and women, black and white, you know, no matter where you came from. I mean, I keep using the word integrity, but God knows in this world of politics and DC and so forth, finding leaders like him are rare. Someone you know
Hey,
whose
Terron.
word is true. Yeah, yeah, Del.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a heads up that we're getting the 1 minute warning from Foggy Bottom, which may be 1 minute, maybe 5 minutes. You know the drill in Washington, and that is where the
Yeah.
Secretary of State will emerge and address the cameras. When he does, we'll cut you off. But I was curious with regards to you heard Sharon Pratt say that he filled the room. Your thoughts on what it was like to have somebody that you went to West Point, and they always tell you guys that great generals are generals that fought wars. He was best known for the person that told us how to stay out of a war. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, obviously, you know, Operation Iraqi Freedom is an exact opposite of the Powell Doctrine. And it's funny having heard that conversation between you and Mayor Pratt because that was constantly brought up amongst my generation of officers. Once we realized that there were no weapons of mass destruction, that the neocons had pulled this okey doke on the entire nation and the world, respected us going into Iraq, and obviously that's a whole nother conversation for another day, right? But we kept leaning heavily on the Powell doctrine. It's like, why are we here? What is the end state? You know, we're not a nation that goes around building democracies all over the world. We go help defend them and so forth, but we realized we were in Iraq for the wrong reason, and we kept leaning on. We know for a fact that if General Powell, in this case Secretary Powell, really would have had the real info, he would have done everything in his power to have kept us out of that war. And so, leaning forward, you know, my contemporaries who are still on active duty, they lean heavily on that when they're advising senior leaders. The question always is, what is the end state? If we're going into this country in a military manner, what is the goal? How can we create the timetable to ensure that we get our men and women out in a reliable amount of time? Because we can't afford to continue all these endless wars.
I'm curious, you look back at the great generals in history, Eisenhower, MacArthur, I shall return. Is Colin Powell going to be the last of the great generals in American history? Because if we learned anything in Iraq and Afghanistan, it is that we can win a war, but we can't conquer a nation.
Well, I'd like to say yes, only because then that would mean that the United States will never be in war ever again. But we know that that's not the case. And there are more junior retired general officers who are great men and women of integrity, like Najee West. I'll throw Martin Dempsey in there too, who I had the honor of indirectly serving under. And so there'll be others. But those others are, I say they're rare. Because going back to your earlier conversation, you know, those rare people are truly selfless. They're truly looking out for those whom they serve, right? Their focus of with respect to their position and their rank isn't about themselves, but how they make those who they serve and their organizations, their teams better. And so, in that context, General Powell stands above the rest. To me, at least in my lifetime, he's the pinnacle of what it meant to serve and not care about your own personal advancement, while at the same time recognizing how important your role in that advanced place was or is, and therefore ensuring that
Yeah.
young people like myself are in a position to also serve in the same manner.
I want to bring in right now Joe Cirincione. He is the former president of the Plowshares Fund, old friend. You worked with Secretary Powell on the Nuclear Threat Initiative. Joe, your thoughts on his passing this morning?
Well, Colin Powell will always be remembered for that speech he gave in February 2003 at the United Nations, a speech that he told me was the greatest mistake of his life. He deeply regretted making that speech, but he was a team player. He believed that in order to have any influence over Iraq policy and possibly avoid going to war altogether, he had to be part of the team, and that included doing what President Bush asked him to do, going to the United Nations. I'm afraid that that mistake has overshadowed so much of what else he did in his life, as your previous guests have mentioned. I worked with him on one of his passions after he left government, which was to continue the work that he began under George H.W. Bush, which was to eliminate nuclear weapons, to reduce the role of nuclear weapons. He told me the story, and he describes it in his wonderful autobiography, which I recommend, My American Journey, of being a commander of an atomic brigade in West Germany, an artillery brigade that would fire nuclear artillery shells in the case of a Soviet invasion. And he told me that it was the stupidest thing he had ever imagined. And he swore to himself then that if he had a chance to do something about reducing nuclear weapons, he would. He did get that chance as chairman of the Joint Staff. He, working under H.W. Bush, he did what was called the Presidential Nuclear Initiatives, which removed thousands of nuclear weapons from the U.S. military, including those atomic cannons that he had once commanded, denuclearizing the U.S. Army, denuclearizing the surface ship, withdrawing thousands of nuclear weapons from places like South Korea. And he continued that work up until the week that he died. He was still passionate about this nuclear issue. He saw it as one of the great threats to human civilization.
Joe, we're watching Foggy Bottom. I've got about a minute left before we have to go to break because the Secretary of State is going to be speaking in just a moment. But please explain to me how rare it is in Washington that a man could be president and decided not to run.
That's exactly right. This is a town of ambition. It runs on ambition and careerism and opportunism. And Colin Powell was clearly a dedicated professional, clearly had the skill set and the national prestige to run for president. At various times, he was voted the most respected man in the United States. He had a real shot at running, but he decided that campaigning was not for him, that he just didn't have it in him to engage in that kind of service to the nation. And instead, he sort of sublimated that. When Barack Obama decided to make a run for president, Colin Powell crossed party lines and endorsed Barack Obama as what he called a transformational figure and actively worked to secure his victory in the presidential campaigns. It was not for him to be president, but he was always proud to have worked with Joe Biden and Barack Obama to help make their presidency, their term in office, a success.
You know, it's fascinating that you bring it up that way, because you're right. I often ask people, why would you want to be president if you can be president? And he was one of those ones that figured out, I can have it both ways. Terron Sims, as we await the secretary, I'm curious to get your thoughts on something. As a soldier, as a former combat vet, what was it about Colin Powell that made men like you want to follow him into battle, knowing that it could be the last day of your life?
Trust. I keep using the word integrity, but people who have never led people or organizations can't truly appreciate what it means to have a leader who you can trust, because you can take a great leader in all the positive ways and place them either in a really bad organization or in an organization that has very little resources, and he or she leading that team will be successful because of their leadership. Whereas you can take a leader who has very bad characteristics and place them in a quote unquote great organization that's well resourced and so forth, and they'll fail because organizations take on the characteristics of their leaders. And so someone like Colin Powell, whether you served under him directly like some of my mentors had, or someone like myself who just looked up to him as an example, especially as a young Black man, knowing that you could trust what he said, you could trust that what he was going to do was going to be to the best of his ability, was always a comfort that we could rely on. And even when he was Secretary of State, when I was in Iraq, there was a certain level of confidence amongst those of us in uniform who were playing that diplomatic role, that we knew that Secretary Powell was there in a more spiritual, obviously overarching strategic manner, of course. But we knew that with him at the helm, we at least were going to have someone who was championing the positive aspects of our mission.
Hey, Joe, tell me something about Colin Powell that we don't know. I often say that Washington is a fascinating town in the sense that you can be driving down the Beltway and you look over to your left or over to your right and you say, that's Colin Powell. You honk your horn at him. He's one of those guys that would honk back at you and probably smile. What about him don't we know?
Well, he's been in the public eye for so long. We do know quite a bit about him, but let me just add to what your previous guest was saying. It wasn't just respect for his judgment. It was the love and the warmth that this man spread in the room, that he cared about you. He cared about people. And when I would walk into a room and he would say in that great deep voice of his, hello, Joe, it made you feel special, made you feel recognized, made you feel honored. And it added to that sentiment of, this is a man you want to follow. This is a man who had a command presence. We could be in a conference room and we'd be with former Senator Sam Nunn, former Senator Richard Lugar, other luminaries, but Colin Powell would dominate just by his presence, not by insisting that you follow what he does, but just by the power of the way he presented his ideas, the sincerity that he projected, and his commitment, knowing that this is a man who devoted his life to public service, first in uniform and then in the cabinet and various other advisory roles. To his dying day, this was a man that was trying to give back to America everything that he and his immigrant parents felt America had given to them.
Our legal expert Candace Kelly is with us too, and she's been listening to this. And Candace, I had a question before we go to break of you. To me, one of the things that stood out about Colin Powell was that he was a gentleman's gentleman. He was the African-American man that Black men like me wanted to be like because of the way he treated women. The type of guy that would open a door for you when you walked in and tell you to go first. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that dying breed of chivalry, the gentleman.
And a lot of the posts that you see online right now are just about that. They're just about people who are saying, listen, thank you, Colin Powell, for teaching me how to be a Black man in this America, a Black man that has faced some of the obstacles that I have, perhaps as a man or a woman, in order to deal with some of the structural racism that is out there, and for having the wherewithal to have the integrity and the grace to continue to be an example all the way until the end. It really is something to be a gentleman's gentleman and to have those attributes that a lot of people just don't have. When in this public discourse, we fight so much on social media, and in the world, we fight so much with each other. To have someone to represent that all the way to the end is truly unique and truly rare, which is why, as I've heard so many people say on this panel, that is just heartbreaking. It just really kind of touches all of us to know that this type of person is gone. But at least we have his memory, at least we have his example to know what he was like while he was here on earth.
And also fascinating because I remember when everybody thought he was going to run for president and he said he wasn't going to run for president. And the reason that he gave was that his wife suffered from mental illness, which actually at that time was something that we did not talk about. Such a bold move.
It was. And it's something that it's hard for people to talk about now, especially inside of the Black community. Such a bold move, not only to give up power, right? Because people get drunk off power. We have seen that over and over again. And he looked and said, my family is more important. My family, my children, they're more important than my career at this point. And that's what really is important at the end of the day. You can't take power with you. You can't take money with you when you leave this earth. What you leave here is the reputation that you have intact, the relationships that you have intact, and just the love that you have for your family. And he was an outstanding example of what to do when you are a father and when you are a loving husband, and you know that you know what comes first in your life.